ECSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the app.
Jared, hey, we're gonna need you to tone it down with the Summer Friday thing, okay?
What are you talking about?
Well, for one, it's not summer anymore.
Oh, really?
Coconut. Also, who is this?
I'm the caddy.
Oh, he's my intern.
Sorry, intern. I'm his intern.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
No golfing in the office, okay? Summer Fridays are over. You can keep the Hawaiian shirt, but the rest of this stuff, all right? Are you grilling?
Oh, yeah. Did you want a burger or a hot dog?
No, grilling in the office.
It's a good point. We should take this outside.
No, that don't. You put that right back down.
Yo, it's all in the hips.
Oh, dude, come on, we gotta go. Let's go.
Good afternoon, sports fans. Welcome, it's that time of day, of course, to the closing bell with Ron Marmalefsky at ronacesports. And I just sent out a retweet, and maybe Ron can retweet it for his guys as well. I guess there's a problem on X with the stream right now, so I just sent out the YouTube link. So anyone hoping to catch us on Twitter, X, whatever, it looks like there's an issue right now, so I sent out a link to our YouTube channel, so I hope everyone is there. So anyway, shout out to Daniel Berry at Sports Highlights. It's a big week in college and NFL. Great game tonight between the Ravens and Cool Joel and the Bengals, and the T-less Bengals, which if I was an NFL GM and that guy went onto the free agency market next year, and someone bid $1 on him, I'd fire him on the spot. But that's just me there. So anyways, shout out to our proud sponsor and partnerships. It's WagerWire. Head on over to Google Play. Download the app. It is free. Travis Sack, Amber Hawley, Jay Berry. The team is endless. Get involved now before you're left at the station. Viva Tequila Seltzer. The East Coast is cuckoo for coconut. And Atlanta Steaks and Seafood, you know the drill by now. Head on over to Facebook, introduce yourself, and follow Terry Smith. Head on over to atlantasteaksandseafood.com. Place an order of $150 or more this week. Get a free 2-pound bag of shrimp, the jumbos. So if you'd like shrimp scampi, you want some surf and turf, Terry is adding that with the promo code ECSI. ECSI. I promise you, I had steak last night, lamb today. He's the best in the business. Without further ado, let's bring him in, Mr. Ron Marmalefsky.
Hi, Jeff. I should never do this show on a full stomach, or maybe I should on a full stomach, because if I'm hungry, then you make me even hungrier with all those great steaks and lamb and stuff like that. But otherwise, a very good day out here on the West Coast.
Big weekend in college sports, 2 heavyweight battles in the SEC. Before we dive into those games and maybe some games that you're taking a peek at, anything from the eye test last Saturday that might have surprised you?
Well, I sure started slow in the morning. I didn't know how the day was shaping up, but the evening was pretty good. I was a little surprised in a trap situation. I know we're going to talk about Mississippi, but Mississippi really came to play last week. I thought Arkansas would put up a little bit more of a fight. So that was a surprise. What we saw in the Big 12 and in the ACC is that these teams relegated themselves maybe to just one bid leagues with the results last week. Iowa State losing outright, Kansas State losing outright, and Clemson losing outright really destroyed kind of the power rating ecosystem between them and the Big 12 and the SEC. So it's not that I was shocked that maybe one or two of them lost, but all three of them losing, that was a surprise and really put a dent into at least two of the four leagues, in my opinion.
And it's so funny because you hit two sides there. It was almost like a nice counterpunch and then a overhand right, because the Ole Miss team I was on early this year on some team totals was successful, and then I just getting hooked, or they're just sluggish. They're slow starters, and I too left them on the desk, and I think, Ron, they just scored again. Jackson Dart threw his 25th touchdown. And it's, again, with a look ahead to Georgia, so surprised there. And then this Louisville team kind of been rounding into form. I just off them on them, and now I start to hype up Dabo and Clemson, and some people were ready to say Clemson as a 1.5, 2-point favorite on a neutral field against Miami. I'm not going to say shocked. I'm going to say stunned at the effort that Clemson put forth on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Clemson, Miami, you're right that Clemson would have probably been a little bit of a favorite in that particular game by the time it came around. Miami had two games they should have lost on their own already this year. But the Louisville team has been hard to predict for me. They've been, even last year with the first year for Jeff Brom, I had them, I was probably underrating them a little bit. And at times they didn't take the next step this year. And then at times they put in an effort that you say, wait, they belong right at the top of the ACC. So it's maybe not as surprising from the Louisville end because they don't have a good handle on them. But I thought Clemson was in a better state of mind and they just didn't deliver.
We were sitting in the catbird seat a handful of weeks ago. Dylan Gabriel 15-1 as the Heisman Trophy winner. They go and upset Ohio State. He goes to the favorite and was the favorite for the last couple of weeks until this past week. The likes of Cam Ward that you were just talking about, Miami, Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty has come down a couple spots. It's still early. We got so much football to go, but thoughts on that Heisman race right now, Ron?
They'll try, the Heisman Trophy voters will try as hard as they can if there's any kind of quarterback on a team that's going to be in the top 4 to 8. That's the person who's going to get the award. So Cam Ward's record right now, undefeated. So he deserves to be in that mix, obviously. And then is he the favorite or who's the favorite then right now? Right?
Cam Ward, I think.
Cam Ward has taken over the favorite. It's too early to anoint him as the guy who's going to do it, but I still think it's wide open. Even Sanders of Colorado, he could pop right back up there. Dylan Gabriel, he's got an undefeated team. You're talking about 3 quarterbacks on 3 undefeated teams. So right now it's a wide open Heisman race. I do think Genty has fallen off. I think I mentioned that a few weeks ago. I wasn't sure how long he would be sustainable. In the last 2 weeks, they sure force-fed him the ball, 70 carries, somewhere in that neighborhood. But his yards per carry has dropped against teams that are not considered highlight reel defensive teams. Decent teams like UNLV on defense, but not in the SEC caliber or in the big, at the top of the Big Ten caliber. So his stock has dropped.
Right now, live at the Circa, Ashton Genty plus 1,000, Cam Ward plus 190, Dylan Gabriel plus 270. Travis Hunter plus 215. Those are your top four right now.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting. Colorado hasn't done anything wrong from an offensive standpoint, and they're playing better defensively. If you look at it, kind of under the radar, Colorado is a much better team on both sides of the ball compared to last year.
And Shedeur Sanders right now plus 2,500. So maybe a little pizza and beer money right there in case they cheat.
Yeah, it'll take other quarterbacks to falter, but if Colorado keeps winning, good test this week, a short favorite on the road against Texas Tech. But there's a reason to believe that Colorado could get into the mix and maybe even enter the Big 12 title game picture, because no one's really eliminated from that title game picture, especially based on what we just talked about last week.
Talked to Paul Stone this morning on the Breakfast Bankroll in his weekly spot. I asked him the first week of the college championship show, the final 12, their brackets. Everyone kind of understands to a certain degree. Division champs, 1, 2, 3, 4, yada, yada, yada. My mini sermon here is, I think they're playing coy here just because if they cheat and they got Ohio State in the last game, then that game will dictate it. Do you think they don't know what to do with Indiana right now, Ron?
I think Indiana is relatively properly rated. If you look at their strength of opponents as it stands right now, it's not as strong as most of these others in the top group. But I think lost in the shuffle, for example, they had to go on a Friday night, I think it was, to Los Angeles to play UCLA. That's a trip the Indiana Hoosiers haven't made in the past. That was a game against a relatively good and sound run defense. We wondered how they would react in that game, and they blew UCLA out. And at the time, everybody's saying, well, UCLA is bad, and so on. But at the time, they weren't that much of a favorite. And then they were without their starting quarterback a couple of weeks ago. They go to Michigan State. Michigan State's a fairly sound defensive team. Michigan State takes a 10-0 lead, and then Indiana, facing adversity for one of the first times, blows them out after that. So they've done nothing wrong. They've earned this right. They're a big favorite, of course, against Michigan. They're expected to take care of business. But if they lose to Ohio State, especially if they lose to Ohio State in they don't get blown out, but they lose, let's say, by 7 to 10 points, and then they win the rest of their games and they go 11-1 and they don't make the Big 12 playoff because it's Ohio State and Oregon. I think they're right where they should be, kind of in that 7-8 range.
You talked about. I'm looking at the schedule here before we get to the two big games I wanted to break down. I'll be at the Heights on Saturday. BC hosting Syracuse. Two teams, I don't want to say going in opposite directions. Syracuse has had some real laying of eggs. And then they not shocked the world, but then the quarterback plays a lot better. And it's amazing what happens when the quarterback plays well, Ron. BC, a 2-point favorite with a 52 against Syracuse. BC, a great start to the year, a couple tough losses, but now have kind of faltered. Can BC bounce back here, win this game, and get that bowl eligibility, or are we looking at them just going to end this season on the keep losing?
Yeah, there's so many different ways to look at this game and handicap this game, because if you look at the pure stats, if I look at the stats that matter for me, BC looks like the better team. Syracuse record is a little bit fraudulent, in my opinion, but as people say, I think even Paul said it or somebody said it on the show that I was listening, but I've said this for years. Winning is contagious, and Syracuse is finding ways to win. They're winning games they shouldn't win. They won against UNLV in overtime. They won last week in a closely contested game that they could have lost. Syracuse, by virtue of their stats and their metrics, they're not as good as their record would indicate. However, the players believe that no matter what the score is, they're going to be competitive and they're going to be in it at the end, because that's what's happened all season long. curious that Boston College is favored in this game. I think it opened a little bit lower and now they're favored. And I think that's telling me, maybe I'm reading too much into it, that BC is the right side in this game. I don't know what their mindset is. You're closer to the situation than I am. I'm not a huge Bill O'Brien fan. I'm not a negative or a positive with him. But on paper, BC does seem like the better team, and there could be a chance to go against Syracuse. I have it kind of penciled in that the way to go against Syracuse might be the following week. I can't remember who they play, but that's the one I had penciled in. But it would not shock me if they lost this game as well.
The two headline games I have in front of us, Georgia Ole Miss, Alabama LSU. We'll start with Georgia Ole Miss. As you said, Jackson Dart had the game that I thought they'd be having all year. Really impressive win against Arkansas, and Georgia just being Georgia here. Short favorites on the road. We saw them a couple weeks ago beat Texas as an underdog on the road. Ole Miss loses this game, they're out. Georgia loses this game, well, then it's going to be that Georgia team with 2 losses, and here comes the song and dances, Ron.
The best way I can put this is Mississippi is the one team in the college football playoff, I think, that you do not want to play. This is Mississippi's best team that I've seen assembled under Lane Kiffin, and their best team in a long, long time. I mean, a long time. If I look at this team, they're stopping the run like they've never stopped it before. They're decent against the pass. They have Dart, who's a high percentage quarterback, takes care of the ball and has legs, which means he can run out of trouble. They have a couple running backs that haven't completely get unleashed, but they have that capability because their yards per carry is very strong. Lane Kiffin always fields teams with great wide receivers. He has many of them now. Unfortunately, one, if not 2 of them, aren't even going to play in this game. And that's unfortunate because this is such a good team right now. Looking back at when they played LSU, that was a trap. That was a terrible scheduling situation for them. I mentioned probably on your show that I liked LSU in that game. Mississippi gave them all they could handle. Then Mississippi could have actually won that game, but in the end, LSU beat them. Might have been overtime. They had that very close game, kind of a lackluster start against Kentucky, and Kentucky has a good defensive team. Georgia, we know they get up for these big games. They came in, they beat Texas. They were saying, oh, they're not good enough to beat Texas this year, and then they go ahead and beat Texas. Georgia's a very good big game kind of talent that you know that they can handle it. But this time, it's not a trap game or anything like that for Georgia, but Mississippi probably has no excuses to hang in this game. I do think that if they lose this game close at 9-3, they could still get in the playoffs. But LSU would hold the tiebreaker. If LSU and Mississippi were both 9-3, the committee might take LSU because they beat Mississippi, but I'm telling you, Mississippi is a better team than LSU, and it would be a loss to be there. I make this a 50-50 game. I'm kind of rooting for Mississippi because I really think they're one of the 6 best teams in the nation. I think I would put them around 6th in the nation, but 3 losses would put a dent in that.
Perfect transition. Alabama, LSU. Alabama about a 3-point favorite at LSU. Unlike Penn State last Saturday that gets the short end of the stick in the noontime game. No whiteout, no night game. LSU 7:30. Both teams coming off a bye. Both teams with 2 losses here. LSU a couple weeks ago, big first half and a no-show in the second half at Texas A&M. Milroe, LSU, Brian Kelly, what do your eyes see here?
Again, a very interesting handicap, and a full disclaimer at the beginning of the year, I thought Alabama would drop back a little bit because they did lose people to the transfer portal. I know they gained some, but with Saban not there, they lost some people. They're going through a coaching transition. They're playing all these teams, Tennessee, LSU on the road. It's not the same Saban road mentality. So I undervalued Alabama at the beginning of the year. I do have some games of the year. I took Tennessee in the game of the year. against Alabama. That worked out, but it was really close. And I have LSU with just 1 point. And so it's not a great deal. I just have LSU +1 in August. But at the time, I thought, obviously, that LSU would be the right side based on my power ratings at the beginning of the year, and that we'd see a little bit of an Alabama drop, which didn't happen. And now I absolutely agree that 3 is the right number in this game. And if I didn't have a play on this game, I would consider LSU +3.5, but I probably wouldn't consider 3. I think Alabama is playing well enough to earn the right to be a short favorite in this game. I still think no excuses. This is LSU trying to say, hey, we belong. We can hang with Alabama. Different game than Tennessee, because Tennessee played a really good defense in that one. I think this is about LSU's quarterback, Nussmeier. He's completing 62.5% of his passes, which I think is a little bit low, to be honest. I think for LSU's program and their scheming and Brian Kelly, I would have liked to see him higher. Plus, he's had multiple interceptions in 3 games this year, including 3 in his last game against A&M. That's a worry as well. But they do have a week off. Actually, both teams traditionally have a week off before they play each other. So here they are. No excuses, but I think if LSU's quarterback has a good day, they will outscore Alabama. It won't be a defensive struggle. And if LSU's quarterback is throwing interceptions, then Alabama prevails. But I slightly lean at the current odds. I wish I leaned more with LSU since I have a ticket on them, but I do favor LSU, let's say 45% in terms of the win factor.
We'll transition into the NFL here. Before we get into tonight's game, which is a fascinating game, a lot at stake too, as we talk backstage in the the fantasy stakes. But that's for another show here. Dennis Allen, next on the chopping block. Not surprised. Team wins the first 2 games of the NFL season. The talk of the town. Put up almost a 50 burger in Jerry's World. Hasn't won since. Derek Carr gets hurt. In comes Spencer Rattler. That wasn't the answer. Derek Carr back. Defense banged up. Trade Lattimore. There goes Dennis Allen. Thoughts on the firing and the thoughts on the Saints moving forward?
Yeah, I feel partially responsible for the Dennis Allen firing since I've called for it for so long. And I was a little adamant on Twitter X, so I apologize to him and his family. I got in one best bet against them before announcing his firing, and because Carolina just had tons of value last week, especially with Derek Carr coming off rust and stuff like that. The organization needs a rebuild, and it probably starts with the GM because he's squandered so many picks. His team has traded up 17 times and down once or something in the last 18. They just don't know how to stockpile picks. They average 5.25 picks per year when the average should be 8. 256 divided by 32, 8. He averages 5.25 picks per year. So they're not stockpiling the roster. When guys like Lattimore get hurt, when Carr gets hurt, when a wide receiver gets hurt, there's no one to step up behind them. It's really hurt the organization. They traded Lattimore and they got 3 draft picks in return, traded 1 as well. So +2 in the draft market. The question is, what is this GM going to do with the draft picks? And the question is, what's the mindset of New Orleans moving forward the rest of this year? It's a study that I have to make. I really have to study the interim head coach. What's he going to do different? I talked up Taysom Hill all last week and what his value would be to this team. And then he didn't get a touch in the 4th quarter. So I really don't understand what the mindset was against Carolina, a team that you can push around defensively. So I don't have high hopes for New Orleans moving forward. Sometimes you get the interim coach bounce. Maybe we see it. Maybe I back them this week. But once it goes south, it may go completely south. We saw that with Washington last year. We'll see that with a couple of teams this year. When it goes south after the trading deadline, it doesn't come back north.
Shout out to Marty Lowe, Roll Tide Roll. He was talking about it all depends on which Jalen Milroe shows up, and I agree 100% with you, Marty. And a shout out to Richard Poplis, Connecticut in the house. Thank you so much there. Two quarterback situations now, and two coaches. I'd say one's been on the hot seat, and one seat's getting hotter. And of course, Trevor Lawrence will be out this week. I've heard rumblings, potential season-ending surgery there. We know Peterson, the struggles that this team has had. We talked about leaving him in London if he lost to the Patriots, which they were able to win. And now in Jerry's world, Dallas, who's been struggling, Dak out. Sounds like the IR. This team now with Cooper Rush, who came in last year, 5-1, I think it was, play the Eagles team here. So thoughts on the Jags and Dallas quarterback situations and coaches now moving forward?
Yeah, so I heard that Mac Jones is the backup at Jacksonville, so that's scary enough. If the Eagles hadn't completely imploded and let them back in the game, I think Jacksonville would have been left for dead. Maybe Jacksonville showed some signs of life, but it was all thanks to their opponent that they were in that game against Philadelphia. They were dead. They were 22-0 dead, and it was going to be worse. But then some curious decisions on the other side by Nick Sirianni. But I think the Jags are nearly dead. I mean, we're pretty much done. Be unfortunate if Trevor Lawrence went down with an injury, because that would completely impact their offense. And it's and I'm glad you brought up the Dallas situation at the same time, because in Jacksonville, if the offense isn't going to function without Trevor Lawrence, they're going to want to pull it back and shorten games and make it defensive struggles. But the Jags defense can't handle that particular part of the equation, and turnovers may still spike. With Cooper Rush, I did a deep dive into the Dallas situation. Cooper Rush doesn't throw interceptions, and he doesn't take sacks, at least in his limited body of work. He hasn't taken many sacks, and he certainly hasn't thrown that many, a little bit better than league average in terms of turnover avoidance, which is really good things. And then Cooper Rush tends, at least the sample size we have with Dallas, they played lower scoring games, so they kept it close to the vest. They hope that Micah Parsons, who might be back in the defense, can keep things close. We don't always know that Philadelphia hits on all cylinders offensively. So I wouldn't say Dallas is dead yet, but I would say this is a critical game for them. They've won the last 6 hosting Philadelphia. I think this game is going to be closer than people realize, but if it's not, then you got to really look internally. I know Jerry Jones isn't one to ever give up on a season, but it would be give up time if they lost a divisional game at home.
An amazing game tonight. The Bengals on life support, catching 6 in Baltimore, who has had a hiccup to the Raiders at home. They're 5-3. Now, are they going to catch the Chiefs? Most likely not, who they've already lost to. A loss here at 5-4 not only is big for them moving forward, it keeps the Bengals alive. And I said I was going to ask you live here, would you feel more comfortable tonight if I sent you $100 and I says you can either take the Bengals +6 or the Bengals team total over 23.5? Where would you put that $100?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I think if the Bengals are going to win this game or cover this game, I think they're going to have to do their side. They're going to have to do well offensively, because the Ravens have been virtually unstoppable on their own offense. So it could be a shootout. And the last game was a shootout, 41-38. So I guess, I don't know the weather report. So I guess I would put my money on the over 23.5 for Cincinnati, because I do think that Burrow's in a good frame of mind. I know he probably doesn't have T. Higgins. It's probably been announced, but he hasn't had T. Higgins during the time that he's just thrown 5 touchdown passes. He has a running back who could come in to spell Chase. Let's see.
Brown.
Chase Brown. Thank you. Chase Brown's doing a wonderful job. He was excellent for me in the prop market last week, but you don't want to give him 100% of the carries. And the guy they brought in, Herbert, he's a 4.9 per carry rusher. I think running backs can be plugged in relatively right away, especially just carrying the ball. They don't have to worry about maybe he's not in on blocking situations and stuff like that. So Cincinnati's going to need run pass balance. I would trend for that. This would be a higher scoring game.
A sneaky game I didn't have on my bingo card, and I don't have the records in front of me. I want to say 6-2 versus 6-2, or 6-2 and 7-2. That's the resurgent Pittsburgh Steelers versus America's team, and that's the Washington Commanders with potential Coach of the Year Dan Quinn. Thoughts on that game?
Yeah, 6-2 versus 7-2, and two teams that all of a sudden became bullish as free agency or as the deadline neared, because they both think they're in the mix, and they should feel like they're in the mix. My favorite game of the week, Pittsburgh, Washington, not from a handicapping betting standpoint, from a watching standpoint, because Pittsburgh has not played many mobile quarterbacks. And Mike Tomlin, I did hear one of his press conferences, which did talk about the fact that Daniels is going to be a test for his team. He's well aware of it, and he's going to have to do some things that they wouldn't normally do defensively to keep Daniels in the pocket. But Daniels is also a high percentage passer. So just keeping him in the pocket, it's not like any other running quarterback, because Daniels is a passing quarterback who happens to be also an excellent running quarterback. So it's a tough task for Pittsburgh. Conversely, it's not that easy a task for Washington's defense. I still have Washington's defense below the 50% mark in the league. I don't think they're a top 15 to 20 defense. And Pittsburgh is going to run right at them. They've got the Warren. They've got Harris. They can run at them. I don't know how much Mike Williams will play, but they have a tight end that they can unleash. And we know that Pickens is deadly in these 50-50 catch situations. It's really 70-30 in his advantage. So I expect a real chess match going on in this game. Really looking forward to watching it. Don't really have an opinion as to who's going to win or not. When little surprised that the number's ticking up, though, that we're almost to a 3. I would have made this game closer to Washington 1.5.
We watched Kansas City win again. We watched, everyone being the Monday morning quarterback. Why didn't Tampa go for 2? Just like the Patriots. And both quarterbacks, once they got that touchdown, just walked off the field. So it was almost like it was predetermined. But take a step back about 10 minutes into that fourth quarter, when Mahomes was out of the pocket and he does the little flip pass, and then he lands on his leg, and the whole world breathed at the same time, because it looked like it was a non-contact potential Achilles injury. Thank God it's Mahomes. He was fine. He came back. I said this to a few colleagues, and you're going to call me crazy on this one. I know it's the NFL. I know it's any given Sunday. Any team can beat any team. We've seen it happen a million times. But I'm going to say in the AFC, the one team right now that matches up the best against Kansas City is a team that can play offense, can play keep away, and has one of the best defenses and one of the better coaching staffs. I'm talking about the Chargers here, and the fact that Herbert and company seem to be rounding into form. Herbert seems to be getting healthier. J.K. Dobbins has looked great. Quentin Johnson actually catching touchdown passes, and their defense has been great. Thoughts on the Chargers moving forward, and thoughts on them if they were to match up against Kansas City?
I think, wasn't that the game that they played earlier, but Herbert probably shouldn't have played that particular game. So it was unfortunate. I do think the Chargers match up very well against Kansas City, because that's the way Harbaugh plays his games. Smash mouth football, really test that run D, really try to get time of possession in his favor. He's got the wide receivers that do more than just catch passes and run routes. They also block. They're team players. They're fundamentally a far better tackling team than they were under Staley in previous years. So they would match up, and they have Derwin James in the back half if they choose to use him in the back half to guard against any long touchdown passes by KC. Now, KC has recognized some of the issues that they had with drop passes and so on. And that's why they added Smith-Schuster, who's banged up, and Hopkins, who caught a lot of passes this past week and showed his value as a sure-handed, reliable target that immediately Mahomes is ready to trust. I think Denver matches up a little bit against Kansas City as well. We saw Denver not match up at all against Baltimore, because you really want to test Baltimore deep. Steve Spagnuolo, he's a little bit better of a defensive coordinator. I think he could do some things that help against Denver and other teams as opposed to the Baltimore as far as the over the top. But Denver has run pass balance too, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle it. They play a little bit of defense too. The big question for Denver in this matchup, and why the Chargers are probably better suited against KC than Denver, is Denver against Baltimore. That was kind of like playing the A teams, and Denver had been playing their fourth place schedule before that. And so I thought Denver would have a lot of wins this year, but it was mainly schedule related. I don't expect them to beat Kansas City on the road, but I actually expect them to be competitive. And if they're not competitive, then we have another instance when we have the haves, which are the KCs in Baltimore, and we have the wannabes, which are Denver and many, many other teams in the league.
Before we get to Ron's closing thoughts and that nice 7-yard or 7.5 button hook here this week, your top 5, any changes in your top 5 in the NFL?
Well, there's an absolutely clear top 4. There's such a gap. I don't even know who's the 5th team, but we have 4 teams: Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, and who am I missing? Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, and the Lions. Yeah. So, and they're almost inseparable. Right now, I have Baltimore and the Lions tied for first, and then Kansas City and Baltimore right behind them. And a team like Kansas City has been so consistent, I haven't had to move their power rating at all, practically all season long. So those 4. I don't really have a 5th team. I suppose San Francisco could be that if fully healthy, and they're coming off the bye, so they have the most potential to crack that, to make the top 4 be the top 5. But otherwise, you've got a handful of teams that are all about the same. Maybe Cincinnati, maybe Green Bay, maybe Minnesota. You can name a bunch of teams, but they're all definitely below the top 4.
And I've been saying this to everyone. I'll say it one more time. If you haven't bought and you plan to buy, you might as well buy your 49ers stock for the NFC and the Super Bowl now before they play on Sunday. Coming off the bye, getting healthier, supposedly the return to CMC. Schedule kind of favors them to make a run. And lastly, Ron, that the NFC West, I wish Seattle would finally decide to pull the plug on the Geno project, and let's see what we got with Sam Howell. Arizona being Arizona, now 1.5 point underdogs. They were 1.5 point favorites, now 1.5 point underdogs to the Jets and the Rams with McVay, a healthy Karen Williams, a healthy Stafford. If Puka can stop punching people and stay on the field with Cooper Kupp and Demarcus Robinson, a formidable opponent. Ron's crystal ball, how does this NFC West shake out?
Wow. I don't think I have an NFC West crystal ball, because if I did, I would be 280 miles east right now at the Circa. But the crystal ball is, give Arizona credit. They've won 3 in a row. I don't think it's sustainable, but I think Arizona would be a pest against any opponent. They can beat anybody, or their defense is just not good enough, I think, to withstand some of the better teams in the league. San Francisco firing on all cylinders, Matthew Stafford firing on all cylinders would have an advantage against Arizona's defense, but I give them a ton of credit. Rams, second quartile, they won 3 in a row. I talked about the importance of the bye week right before their second quartile. They've done some things, incorporated their youngsters on defense, so we know they're better there. We keep underestimating Stafford. We keep forgetting that he's a top 10, top 6, top 5 quarterback in this league. And with Puka, and again, cluster injuries all over the place, especially at wide receiver. When you have Puka and you have Kupp back, you're a completely different team. You're a playoff team. The Rams are a playoff team as it stands right now. That would be my crystal ball. And Seattle, I think it's just growing pains right now. They've got some talent with Witherspoon. They've got some talent in the backfield when their backfield is completely healthy. Same at wide receiver. When Metcalf is completely healthy, they go 3 deep, one of the greatest groups of wide receivers in the NFL. But there's still growing pains, offensive line growing pains, linebacker, tremendous growing pains. Geno Smith, we've hit his ceiling. He can win you games, but he can't quite get you over the hump. So I think of the three, the Rams are probably the most consistent, and then you're waiting to see if you can just press a button and San Francisco explodes ahead of all of them. But this will be a good test because they play a Tampa team that have cluster injuries at wide receiver. Boy, Baker Mayfield's done everything he could. The 2 losses he just had could have been 2 wins if he even had one of those 2 wide receivers in there. They're playing so tough. They're at such a schedule disadvantage this week, playing off Monday night and San Francisco off 2 weeks. We don't know if San Francisco will completely press the button. I guess I'd be most comfortable of the 4 with the Rams, but I would be happy the way any of those teams are played out. The future's bright, maybe for all of them.
Yeah, and pre-flop, we had discussed that the AFC North was top to bottom. The most competitive will be the must-watch, and then with the floundering of the Browns and Deshaun Watson, I think it's really this year the NFC West to keep an eye on as well. So that time of the show, nice 7.5-yard button hook. Ron, take us away.
Well, let's talk about the negatives this week, Jeff. Sorry to say, but if you're looking to make money, you always want to look at what team is going to be Washington from last year when they sold their 2 players and then never won a game. So the 3 teams that I'm looking at closely, and I want to see how they react this week. And after that, it could be sell, would be the Saints. If they lay an egg in a divisional matchup at home against Atlanta, always competitive games, usually decided with the underdog winning. If they lay an egg with their interim coach, special team background, and so on, I don't see how anybody gets motivated within that organization to say, hey, we're going to step up. They don't have a lot of institutional memory team leaders now that Lattimore is gone and so on. Carr, he's a veteran in the NFL, but he's only been there 2 or 3 years. So not even 3 full years. So who's going to step up if they lose to Atlanta? Cleveland was in sell mode. We saw that a week before the trade deadline. We saw that this past week. They're coming off a bye. How do they play off the bye week? They could be in sell mode. We saw Jameis Winston's high. We saw Jameis Winston's low. If they lose another game, they're in sell mode. And I'm watching Tennessee also. They've got some quarterback issues. The coach is trying to find his way. They need a bye desperately to reset. They're not getting it right now. Tennessee just doesn't look like a team that knows what it's about right now. There's not enough things happening offensively that get me excited about this team. Those are 3 teams I'm willing to sell. And I'm going to leave you with one final note. Why do teams continually draft in the top 10, get a really good 4th place schedule, blow it all, and then they draft in the top 10 again and again and again? And it's not for Carolina, just Bryce Young and selling the farm on Bryce Young. It's not just because that a team like Carolina squanders draft picks on draft day, but they do something a little bit crazy in the last 24 hours. Remember, they drafted Jonathan Brooks out of Texas this year, and everybody loves Jonathan Brooks, who hasn't played yet, but he might play this week or next. So running backs don't move the win needle, but what do? I like Hubbard as a running back. He's a fine running back. It's a good tandem running back. They give him $15 million guaranteed, 33 to 37 million overall package for the next 4 years to be their running back, to at best split carries with a healthy Jonathan Brooks, because Brooks is the guy they drafted as a top running back in the NFL in the 2nd round. So they have Brooks, they have Hubbard. Fantastic. They're great at running back. That's not where you want to put your money in the NFL. This is why teams suffer and why Carolina is digging themselves a hole as an organization. I'm just going to say it to all the other 31 teams and everybody who handicaps these games. if you're putting a lot of money into the running back group, and I know Jonathan Brooks is on a rookie contract, but if you're paying so much attention to the running back group, what areas are you not paying attention to? Where could that second round draft pick been used better for? What could you have done with the money that you spent on Hubbard? You're missing the point. You gave up Brian Burns for a second and fifth round pick the previous year, your best player. I just shake my head when teams like Carolina make these moves, and I don't think it should go unnoticed if you're handicapping season wins or if you're handicapping the sport.
And I'll add on to the blunders that you're talking about, the locals here talking about the Patriots, and it's going untalked about locally. Thanks to Felger and Maz, again, it's brought up. As we know, with the Belichick era, they can't draft wide receivers. They just never have been able to. Whether they passed on Demaryius Thomas, they trade down, and then they passed on oh my God, the Dallas wide receiver. I'm drawing a blank here. Anyways, Des Bryant. They passed on both of those. So the comedy here is they know they got the layup with Drake May because he fell into their lap. So then it comes to their second pick. They wanted to move up and take Leggett, and Buffalo wouldn't make that move. They went and gave it to Carolina. So they moved back 4 spots. So they draft Jalen Polk from Washington, who's been a malcontent, dropping passes. He's been bad, Ron. He's been bad. And now they bring up, you know who they passed on to draft Polk? Ladd McConkey, who we know what he did at Georgia, and we see him emerging. So, again, you compound one mistake to another, and not that Ladd McConkey would have led to 3 or 4 more wins, but in the long term, Ron, it just seems like it's compounded, Ron.
Well, I don't think they have the right GM in place. And obviously, even with Belichick, what happened in the league is the league got faster. Kansas City got faster offensively and defensively. Miami got faster. A lot of teams saw the value of speed and RPOs and getting people out in space. New England was drafting on different fundamentals. And quite frankly, from the guy from Vanderbilt, Williams, the cornerback, all the way through the last 5 years, they've drafted players that don't have the requisite speed to play at those particular positions. You have to be fast enough. You have to hit a certain threshold at cornerback. And Williams was an excellent form tackler. I studied him at Vanderbilt. He knew what he was doing in terms of how to read defenses, but he wasn't fast enough to get there. And that's the problem in the NFL, because these guys are fast. You're not going to cover Tyreek Hill with somebody like that. And New England has to get faster. New England hasn't drafted well in a number of positions, but they've taught well. And when that teaching leaves in Bill Belichick and you lose that aspect, then you realize you have a roster that's not good enough. And I think you got to let all the rookies that you can play right now and find out who are keepers and who are not keepers. And then you have to redraft down the road. Ladd McConkey is a separate case because he just happens to fit Jim Harbaugh perfectly as to how he runs routes, how he catches passes, how he blocks. That just fits what the Chargers and what, if he was with Michigan, that just fits how Harbaugh fits. He may not have fit as well with other organizations. Sometimes it's person-team fit. In fact, for me in the draft, it's always person-team fit. But certainly, as a malcontent, if Polk's a malcontent, that doesn't help things.
And you think of the Patriots and their success, Wes Welker, Julian Edelman. And again, this would have been a perfect binky for May for years and years to come. And as the draft was progressing, I know you heard me all the way in LA because we did a show together. We talked Philly, we talked New England. The Cooper DeJean from Iowa just kept dropping. And we got Christian Gonzalez on one side. I'm like, gosh, you can get your wide receivers later. There's the perfect bookends right there. They don't listen to me, Ron.
I don't understand it. Yeah, DeJean was a borderline first round pick for me, so he should have gone higher in the draft. And you're right when you bring up those other names. If you have a quarterback like Tom Brady who says, if I'm gonna throw to a spot, your wide receiver better know how to get to that spot. McConkey and Brady would have been an ideal Wes Welker type fit. Now, I don't know whether that works with Drake May. He's not the same kind of passer, but you're right about that correlation. And so you have to look for the right fit for your quarterback.
Well, I could talk hours for you. I know it's late afternoon. I want to give you some sunlight if you want to go hit the tennis ball around. So, Scroll's been going the whole time. Tell everyone, obviously, on Twitter at ronacesports, tell them about your podcast and any written work that you might or might not have this week.
Yeah. We didn't have any written work this week. We had a couple of great articles out there that worked out quite well, especially the NCAA one the previous week. Try to write some more this coming week. That's for wagertalk.com. I think I'll make a couple of special appearances next week on some shows. And then Chris and I, we're always brainstorming. We're always challenging each other on our Tuesday show, noon West Coast time. And just before your show, when we go on at noon West Coast time on Thursday, Ted joins us and we go over the Thursday game. We get some sound bites. So always love talking football with you, Jeff, and wherever I can, because the season is half over already. And pretty soon I'll be unemployed again.
Russell Saylor, either you guys interested in a Derek Carr MVP ticket? I tell you what, Russell, you either bronze it or it makes a good beer coaster, or you can use it as a dartboard, or on New Year's Eve, you can use it as confetti because that has left the building. So I want to shout out to Marty Lowe, Richard Poplis, of course, Mr. Russell Saylor. Russell says, great work, guys. Have a great weekend. And to you, Ron, thank you as always. To everyone else watching and listening, tomorrow morning, 11 a.m., the NCAA Insiders, Matt Grissom and Nick will be back to talk some NCAA football. And at 11:30 or 11:35, Adam Trigger will be here to talk some college basketball. And at some point in the afternoon, me and Riley Magnuson will be back for the closing bell. Oh, yeah, 10 a.m. I will be on with Andrew McGinnis and Wager Talk at McGinnis Picks on his YouTube station. Everyone, guys, enjoy the NFL. Have some fun, and we will see you soon.